So much to talk about on Perspective this week. Some Tynwald leftovers, whistleblowing and a Manx framework for awarding degrees, the fallout from Lawrie Hooper's resignation, a new Chief Minister candidate explains why he's putting his name forward, energy policy, Crogga and a suggested $500 million raid on our National Insurance Fund. We'll hear from Chris Thomas shortly, but first I caught up with Julie Edge earlier this week and asked about her two motions to last week's Tynwald.
The first motion was with regards to looking at a framework for awarding degrees and qualifications on the Isle of Man. When I was the Minister for Education, I became very aware that outside of UCM, there are other organisations that are offering qualifications and certification on the island, but they're not necessarily able to then give that qualified certification for degree level courses, so level 7 courses. And Once I looked into it, and I did get contact from a couple of people on island that are doing qualifications from the Isle of Man for many other parts of the world. So I thought, are we actually missing an opportunity here? Could this be the next economic boom for the Isle of Man if we had a proper degree awarding framework, which Malta have done? And I actually think the Isle of Man's far better from a regulation framework point of view than an awful lot of other areas. We've always been leaders in this. We've done it with insurance, we've done it with e-gaming. And I do think it's a missed opportunity by not looking at whether we could have a framework in place to do this.
That was what you were after, was an investigation. You weren't requiring government then and there to immediately adopt this. It was just looking into it.
No, I wasn't at all. And, it was interesting because days before the debate, we had the announcement from UCM that they'd signed another 6-year contract with Chester University. Obviously, I don't know what's in that contract, but I thought this is interesting that that's announced just before. And as far as I can remember, I'm sure it was only ever a 3-year contract. So I thought, have they picked this up completely wrong? I'm not saying that an organisation can come along and be the University of the Isle of Man, etc. This is purely having a qualifications framework that's recognised around the world. If somebody invests money and pays for a qualification, that they have got the backing of a framework from a government, really.
So why?
License.
I mean, obviously you were Education Minister. You had the opportunity to do this when you were Minister. Why did you not do it then?
I literally become aware of it sort of in those last few months, where, before I was removed with a letter that was amazing. I'd done an amazing job.
Yes, you weren't sacked, but you were just too good for the role.
Too good for the job. Clearly, I was making savings and delivering. I don't think that was a criteria that was wanted. So it was really continuing that on. I'd had conversations with the now Education Minister, had conversations with the Chief Minister, and I'll be perfectly honest, I don't think they're grasping what it is that this could be. There's the world's changing fast. It's becoming a very online learning basis world, isn't it? People aren't going to be sat behind desks and computers anymore, but they're also looking for qualifications that they can earn and learn. So they want to be earning money and they want to learn, but get good qualifications and quality assurance qualifications behind it. And I just want to make sure the Isle of Man is in that space. Is it a viable space to be in? I think it really is. I think there's great opportunity, and it's to make sure that it was an income stream, a new economic income stream. And it's a shame that that was missed. However, I won't give up. I'll keep going and try and explain that better, because members, when they stood up and talked, well, I don't want a degree. I want a degree from the Russell Group. It wasn't about that. It's about the changing world in that education space and e-learning, and actually the skill sets that people are needing now. They want to earn a living, but that's where they get those human skills and that experience of working with people, and then you get your qualifications outside of that. And that's how I did it when I was a youngster.
So this isn't bringing students into the Isle of Man. This is just an online experience.
Well, no. Obviously, there is opportunity to expand into that, but until you've got that framework deciding what it is you want to make that investment into and what the Isle of Man's going to be that leader in. But one of the suggestions is the graduation ceremonies could be held on island, and I did say this in my speech. off-season. So fill our hotels and have 300 students come over for their graduation ceremony with their families. So there was opportunity there that I think's been missed for the outside of our normal tourism season that could be an economic benefit in the hospitality and leisure industry as well.
Do you think possibly experience with things like the Isle of Man Business School, which didn't quite live up to the promise that it had originally was originally laid out for us? Maybe people have decided, well, we kind of tried some of this and it didn't quite work. Or
well, it was interesting because that was 25 years ago, and obviously Chris Thomas from Douglas Central came over to the island to be part of that.
So maybe that's the reason why
people... No, but I think there's the whole point. A framework would allow and enable entrepreneurs or whatever to set up business, possibly through a proper regulated framework, and we won't be seeing people using the Isle of Man as a place where they can register a company, sell courses, and there's no regulation or framework around it.
So then you had that one. You then had the prescribed persons one, which it seemed like an odd one not to win. It seemed strange that Tynwald members didn't think that they were suitable people for whistleblowers to come to. Well, I don't know. As I say, sadly, I missed the debate because I had to be elsewhere. Yeah. But what was the reason given for not supporting that?
The majority of members felt that they could carry on doing what they're doing, that they help people anyway. But what this was actually about was ensuring that if somebody did raise an issue with them, they actually were prescribed to do something with that, to direct it onto the right appropriate people and that. Whereas at the minute, and we've seen this in the Dr. Anson case, information was given to political members and they did nothing with it. And look where we ended up as an island. So really that's what I'm trying to ensure, that if you're in public office, the public have put their trust in you to be in that public office, you should be accountable for information you receive. We all receive every day an awful lot of information from people, and we do have to filter that and think, actually, that could be a matter of public interest. As a prescribed person, you would have that duty that it is in the public interest to report it and help signpost people. And really, that's my key thing. We need a framework that people understand, and I think possibly if I brought this back, say in 6 months' time, they would grasp it. But in employment law, currently, politicians are not down as prescribed persons. We were previously in the whistleblowing policy for the Isle of Man government. We've been taken out of that as well since the Dr. Anson case. Now, that's not what was promised following Dr. Anson. What was promised was the culture will change. We'll ensure that the right policies and processes are in place. And to be honest, for whistleblowers, they're already there, but they need to be followed. And that's the errors of that situation. They just weren't adhered to.
So your motion, if it had passed, would have placed a duty on members to actually take the information and do something with it. It's not so much that they would have the power to do it should they choose to do it, but in a way they would almost feel compelled, despite what they thought about the information. Maybe there was some reason why they thought, actually, this is vexatious, or it's not an issue that I think is as serious as the whistleblower thinks. They wouldn't be able to make that decision, presumably, if they were a prescribed person, as you're describing.
And certainly it's in Westminster. MPs are prescribed persons in Westminster, but they do have a framework around it, and they know how to deal with that. And they've got a criteria set that's like, if it reaches this, you need to do something with it. So there would be no reason why we couldn't adopt something like that in the Isle of Man to give members assurance. But one of the areas that does concern me is we should have the confidence to deal with that in our jobs, and we shouldn't be abrogating that responsibility to the people, that if they've got a public concern, we should do something with it. We shouldn't be making the decisions necessarily on any of that, but we need to know what to do with it and pass it on and it's to protect the individual and let them know that we're a responsible government, we're transparent, and make sure that things are investigated in the appropriate way.
Was it a heavy defeat in Keys and in Tynwald, I should say?
It was. I was the only one that voted for it.
Oh, gosh.
I'm hoping it's not going to be one of them that I say I told you so in the future. But
So you couldn't even manage to persuade your colleagues in the Policy Alliance?
To be honest, through the debate, and it was a really good debate, and there was lots of really good contributions. Through it, I realised that perhaps I should have come forward and said, this is a framework that we need. I think we need to get that framework in place. But I will be watching carefully when the prescribed persons order comes through in November from the Department for Enterprise, and I'll be keeping a close eye on it to make sure it's great. I looked at it just before the debate, and, Department of Education, Sport and Culture, that's what my area of familiarity. I looked at it, and they're only a prescribed person for safeguarding.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's bigger issues that could be that things could be reported to them that's beyond safeguarding. So I think the order actually needs a bit more meat behind it anyway, and a bit more strength. So I will be looking to see what comes forward in November and see where we go from there.
So we've discussed your two motions, but of course, as I said as I was introducing these, the big story from the October Tynwald was the departure of the Health Minister, and possibly not just the fact that he went, it was the way that he went, giving absolutely no notice to the Chief Minister and being pretty damning in what he said in his resignation speech. Obviously, the Chief Minister has rejected a lot of what was said, but as a consequence, I'm guessing of Lawrie Hooper's resignation, we now have Tim Glover putting forward a declaratory motion to the House of Keys, which calls for the Chief Minister's, calls a vote of confidence in the Chief Minister. How have we got to this position? Because, 3 years in, we're still struggling to see the meaningful delivery of the policies that the government is supposed to be delivering. And, most people come election time will see government as most of the members of the House of Keys. You don't get out of it that easily and just say, oh, well, it's all Coleman's fault. People will expect that things will have been delivered. Can we really afford to be doing this kind of navel-gazing exercise? Surely we should all, or members should all be pulling together for the best interest of the island.
Totally agree, Phil. There are groups of us that do pull together. I think the most surprising was the way that the resignation came. Certainly that's not the way I or many members would do it. It was strange at the first sitting to do that. Why not do it at the end of the last session? Was there any timelines involved here? With regards to the reasoning behind it, why go through a whole summer of that and then do it? Because I'm not sure there'd been decisions the week before. However, I do think the previous minister did say there was something that happened the week before. Yeah. As you know, backbenchers aren't involved in everything. But I then think that the Chief Minister taking on board and announcing, I think it was on Friday, with regards to he'd put two members in there. I think it was a big mistake to put the previous Health Minister, David Ashford, back in. I'm not saying that's anything against David's ability, but I think following the big tribunal and the implications there, that the public were going to not be happy about that. So I think that was another mistake that's probably then brought a lot of outcry from constituents. I have had constituents onto me, and perhaps that's why Tim's thought it's the right thing to do to come forward. Has he come forward with the right motion? I don't believe he has. I think it's wrong. I think that it should have been the Council of Ministers a vote that, and I can't remember the exact one.
That would be a vote of confidence.
It's a vote of confidence in the government, and because at the end of the day, it's not the Chief Minister. He's got a team of people supposed to be helping and supporting him. So if there's a failure in the Chief Minister, it's a failure in his government, and I think he's brought the wrong motion, to be honest. as I've said, I would prefer to see that there is a vote of no confidence there now on the order paper for next week. I think that's an awful position for us to be in. I think there needs to be some strong decisions made, and I have said to the Chief Minister that I think he should step down. He should stand again. I don't think he should walk away, because who else have we got at this present time? But how are we going to bring back that confidence in the government if he keeps the same team? And I think he should make some changes if he keeps the team, or for the confidence of the public. And I think that would be the honourable thing to do, and then stand up and lead our island to where we need to be. And, it's 2 years, as everybody's said, but let's see some delivery. That was one of my key things: deliver. And I actually think in my role I did. So there was very little they could say to me with regards to that, but I'm not seeing that from other areas. There's lots not coming forward on time. And I think the Chief Minister needs a team of people with him that are prepared to deliver, make tough decisions, fiscal responsibility. I was doing that. I was saving £500,000 for the Department of Education, and look, I lost my job, but there's people now coming saying, well, we're 16 million overspend and we're only halfway through the year. What's going on? You cannot do that in government. You need to lead from the centre, and the Chief Minister needs to be taking action if his ministers are not up to the job and not delivering.
So how does this work then? I mean, if the Chief Minister stepped down and then you would vote him back in again, why would you want him to step down so you could vote him back in?
I think it gives us more of an opportunity to have that discussion, that open debate. I think it's between 7 and 21 days you have to get a new Chief Minister. That would give opportunity for public sessions, public, meetings, to see who really is the strongest person in there. As I've said, there's not many people that I believe could do the job, but the longest serving members in there are the Speaker of the House Keys. They are Chris Thomas. I think the Speaker's probably the longest, to be honest. Chris Thomas and Alf Cannon. So it's only between them three people in my mind that are up for the job. I don't think I would vote for anybody else. I've worked with a lot of them, and I don't think there's really anybody else up to that job at the present time.
So if I'm pretty confident that the motion will be put to the House of Keys. What's the likely outcome? I mean, are you a betting person? Are you putting any money as to whether the vote of confidence is going to be successful, or this vote of no confidence, is that going to succeed in ousting the Chief Minister, do you think? Or
I've obviously spoke to a few colleagues today after the House of Keys. At the present time, I think it could be 50-50. And that's the risk, isn't it? Because if you get very close to the numbers, that's a vote of no confidence, really. I think just the motion going forward is a vote of no confidence anyway. So I think it needs to be the Chief Minister that makes his mind up as to how he's going to deal with this and come forward, that stronger leader that we need, proving that actually I've still got my job, but I did put it to the vote of my colleagues, and please have trust in me. I'm going to carry on and keep going on the policies that I am. Whether it'll come to that, I've no idea. I've not experienced this in 8 years. This is the first time, although it's been talked about a few times. But normally we can resolve things without it coming to an actual item on the order paper. Tim Glover could withdraw it before Tuesday, depending on what happens in between, but I'm sure now it's out there in the public he won't. He's going to have to be a lot of persuasion, but I think we all need to have our good speeches as to why we think this current Chief Minister should carry on if he doesn't step down before. Or the problem we've got, though, Phil, we're going into a debate on it, and we don't know who's sitting in the wings that might want to do the job. So you're actually making a judgment, and you don't know who else might want to step up to that, and whether you agree with their policies, or, and align with them better. Don't know. It's difficult. Possibly,
I don't know. You tell me. Possibly one of the reasons the Chief Minister has perhaps become unpopular amongst some members is because he is prepared to, say things that perhaps in a more collegiate and, consensus-building government wouldn't be said. But maybe this is what's been needed.
Yeah, for and against that, really, isn't there? But the fact that we've had a chief minister that says he's got senior ministers, well, who are they? I was in there. Who is his senior ministers? I think I know who the group are that he meets with, but are they the right people? Were they responsible for health? Were they responsible for education? No, I can tell you they weren't. I think it's some of this language and this railroading through of some things that has really concerned members, not actually the policy that the people are looking for, what affects and impacts most people. We've moved forward some great strategies, but they're for the minority, they're not for the majority. And I think it's some of that direction that really needs clarifying and cleared up in the next 2 years and deliver services for our people. Let's get them GP appointments, let's get dentists. To me, that's not an easy thing, not too difficult to fix, but would you come to the Isle of Man at the minute with the turmoil in our health system? That's probably the problem. And you've got to use the people currently in your system that know the professionals. They've all got colleagues working in hospitals throughout the world, or GPs. They'll have colleagues that might want to move to the Isle of Man, but they want to know they're in a stable situation and that they're respected for the role that they're delivering for the people.
And you mentioned health there, and we talked about this earlier. The Chief Minister, of course, is now trying to be the Chief Minister and the Health Minister. Surely to goodness, rather than having to defend his position as Chief Minister, members should be giving them a bit more time to actually appoint someone to take over in health and address the urgent issues that certainly Chief Minister has identified that need addressing. Surely that's a much more important thing than to be chasing around after have we got confidence in the Chief Minister or not.
Yeah, and I think whether that's anything to do with why there is a vote of no confidence, but my experience in the last administration, and many people probably think, oh, she wouldn't have said that in the last administration, but actually Howard Quayle did meet with members. If a situation like this had arisen, he would have emailed all members and said, I want to speak to you. This is the situation in. I want to have conversations with everybody about how I'm going to replace the health minister, for instance, and because depending on who that is, it could cause an impact in another department or another area. So he would always reset with members, and I think that's what the Chief Minister has been lacking in, and he's been making decisions and he's not been involving the backbenchers, getting them on board with his direction and making sure we all need to work together for the people of the Isle of Man. It shouldn't be, he's my best friend, I'll have him as health minister and he's a yes man and he'll do what he says. It should be the best person for the job, but make sure they can build a team as well.
So if we were holding this interview after the House of Keys sits and deliberates on this no confidence motion, where would you be putting your money? Would we be talking about looking for a new Chief Minister, or do you think we'll probably end up with the Chief Minister damaged by the vote, but not hold below the waterline? I
think what you've just said is absolutely correct. It's going to be damaging no matter what, because it's there, it's on the order paper, and that's why my approach is step down, stand again. Could I support that? I could, because that would have to be presented to me in the right way. The way it is, I think it's a vote no confidence anyway.
That was Onken MHK Julie Edge. Douglas Central MHK Chris Thomas has one or two concerns about the report released this week into the National Insurance Fund.
We've had the Government Actuaries Department review and we've got the projected date for the fund to be extinguished, 2046. Obviously, when the fund is extinguished depends on how much is paid into it in the future and how much comes out of it, and also how we use the investment reserve. So although this last week there's begun to be a discussion about triple lock and those sorts of things, what I noticed in the policy principles of these funds was actually policy principle number 3, and I'm going to read it for you. All expenditure from the fund should be fully funded through NI contributions. So that's major. that's taking the Isle of Man to the situation that exists in the Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
So,
where we pay as we go, we don't use our fund.
Where would we be at the moment then? A lot of it would be interest from the fund.
Exactly. For the last decade or so, we've been using the interest to help us pay benefits and pensions. Then the principle above that is that we only need 2 times the annual expenditure inside the fund. We currently have 4 times plus. So what that basically is saying is Treasury is thinking of spending £500 million from the NI fund. And you and I know that the furore that's been around for 15 years about the 40 million or so that was taken out to fund the hospital, and now we're talking about £500 million, £500 million potentially available because of that principle.
And are they saying that explicitly, or
it's there? No, it's there. It's there in print. It's there in principle. It talks about only needing 2 times the annual expenditure inside the reserve. They don't mention the £500 million. That's me. I've put that in for you to give the real meaning of it. They also help us in the principles. They tell us where the fund could be spent, and what they say: the fund will only be invested in the following policy areas: health and social care, education, employment, or in support of the economy more generally. This will still be subject to Tynwald approval. So what we have there laid out is that there's £500 million that could be used, say, to do a healthcare transition from the NI fund, which I thought, and I'll die in a ditch over this, I thought was there for pensioners and for social security payments. It could be used for the economy more generally. Well, what's that all about? Is that about filling up brownfield sites and paying it for developers? So to me, this is massive. This is only a sort of white paper, but the public needs to be paying attention. There's more to all this than just the triple lock. And
you could be argued as having an interest in undermining the person who's issued this particular document, Alex Allinson. Alex is often quoted as being a potential successor to the Chief Minister. Obviously, the Chief Minister's position is going to be discussed, and indeed a vote of confidence is going to be put in Keys on Tuesday. So you've got an interest in maybe undermining the credibility of one of the potential candidates should the Chief Minister be unsuccessful in defending his position.
I don't play the person in politics. I do the right thing for the future of public policy and the use of public reserves to provide things that the public need and want. And so the case I've just made there is we need to think carefully before we spend £500 million, 500 million on these new policy areas, rather than keeping it as a fund to help us with social security. It is true I've been very critical of many of the Treasury policies over the last few years. I worked with Mrs. Christian, Miss Edge, to make the point that education funding review was very important, and with Mrs. Christian to basically point out in July that we didn't have costed and funded island plan and an economic strategy. We just had aspirations in the island plan and the economic strategy which weren't funded and costed, and ultimately that goes back to Treasury. It goes beyond that as well, though, because the way I see it as a purist, it's government which comes out of the House of Keys after an election that should be setting the priorities in the light of what the people have told the politicians at the elections. And at the moment, it seems to me we've got Treasury running the show. Treasury's got officers embedded in all the departments that tell the departments what they might get funding for and what they might not get funding for. And I want to go back to the time when we had a national government programme spending our precious public reserves where we needed to do it according to an election. So am I having a go at Dr. Allinson? Well, I'm having a go at Treasury and its policies, yes.
And presumably you're going to declare your candidacy, assuming or presuming that a vacancy existed for Chief Minister?
Well, I think Mrs. Edge made the point that at this moment in an electoral cycle, coming into the 4th year, experience is going to matter, because what we need now is we need to fix the problems that need to be fixed urgently, and we need to set out clearly the options that exist for fundamental things like energy strategy, national insurance, pensions, so much more, housing, clearly, so that the election can help us make the bold, big decisions that we need to make. So yes, I am a candidate, because in the same way that I didn't vote for either of the Chief Minister candidates back in 2021 because there weren't clear policy direction on the table, I didn't vote for either of the candidates. I am available now, and if I was to have the for my colleagues to need me and for the people to need a politician like me, somebody who's with my sort of attention to detail, forensic analysis, laying out costed, funded options for 2 years up until the election to make sure the 2026 election is better than the 2021, it would be my privilege to serve.
And how would you make the 2026 election better? What do you think is the problem?
Well, I say we've got some immediate problems that need fixing now. So the reason I joined the Department of Health and Social Care as a departmental member was never even in question that I would join as a minister, because I don't agree with the government the Island Plan. I voted against the Island Plan. I voted against the last budget. I'm not going to. I'm principled. I'm honourable. I'm not going to become a minister with other ministers who have policies that I don't agree with, but the issues in healthcare are so profound, they needed fixing. And I think Mr. Ashford and myself were very pleased that Mr. Cannon stood up and is taking a lot of time and paying a lot of attention and using all his experience to apply to this problem. And with Mr. Ashford, very pleased to join him in that.
Do you think Lawrie Hooper, because Lawrie Hooper has suggested it just needed more time, it's not an easy problem to fix, and they were starting to make inroads into fixing that problem. Are you not convinced by that?
No, I'm not convinced by that at all. We've got parameters, so we've got to provide the services in healthcare that the public need and expect. We've got to show financial discipline. So we've got to, in this year, we've got to look at things afresh and go back. We could even look at what I did in the Department of Infrastructure with the Chief Officer and the Treasury, because you won't remember it until I remind you of it. But in August 2022, there was a headline that the Department of Infrastructure was expected to be £20 million over budget by the end of that financial year. And in the end, I didn't have to go back to Tynwald as a minister. We eliminated that £20 million overspend. I think everybody in government should be coming along and asking me and the Chief Officer and the people involved in finance how we did that. And how we did that is we got money from the contingency fund for energy costs. We got money from to support airlines. We got money here and there to help us do the absolutely essential things around connectivity and around highways. And we stopped spending money on things like a fleet and on maintaining government buildings, because that wasn't going to matter in the next 6 months. And most importantly, we had a recruitment freeze for everybody other than air traffic controllers. We genuinely, for the 6 months of that financial year, we had a recruitment freeze. Every role that was recruited to had to go through the senior leadership team, and I was cited of the decisions. And that's what you need to do. So that's very important in healthcare. So Lawrie Hooper, Minister Hooper, the former minister, is wrong. Mr. Cannon is right. That's a pressing issue that needs fixing. Beyond that, we've got to look to 25, 26, and that's a more pressing issue about the future. We need to have a big conversation, as somebody like Chris Robertshaw would put it, about what we need to be able to afford, and once we've got that number, we need to work out how we're going to pay for it.
So in terms of the 2026 election, assuming that, well, there's loads of assumptions to make here, aren't there? The first assumption is that Tim Glover's motion is successful and the House of Keys backs his call that there should be no confidence in the Chief Minister. Then the next assumption is that the Chief Minister acts on that view expressed in Tynwald, in Keys, because he doesn't have to, does he? The motion in Keys is a declaratory motion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not doesn't require anyone to do anything as a result. But assuming that the Chief Minister would be persuaded by that vote to step down, and then the next step is that there will be an election, presumably, to that post, and is that a 6 week?
No, even shorter. Even
right.
3 can be 3 weeks. It's in the law. There's a limit, and then it's in standing orders, so it's in the Speaker's discretion. That's why the Speaker's got to be impeccably neutral at the moment, because he can be determining this sort of thing in a few weeks. Yeah, you're right, but there are other assumptions. Mr. Cannon said that him and I are aligned on lots of things, and he is a very principled person. I think he actually would do the right thing, so you never know. It might be that he decides he needs a vote of confidence in him, so it might be that he steps down to get that vote of confidence through having another Chief Minister election. That's another possibility that exists. And then
it's not very likely, though, is it?
Well, let's see. You know, we're at a moment that Mr. Ramsey has described as being historic. You know, let's see what happens. But that is a possibility. And as I've said, Mr. Cannon is flamboyant, but he's also principled. And I don't think. Anyhow, that's that's a possibility. And the other thing to remember is in these moments, it's a bit like when America launches an invasion into the Middle East or something like that. What they really should be thinking about at that moment is what happens afterwards. And that's what we've all got to remember. The reason I joined the Department of Health and Social Care is that's an issue that needs fixing, and it needs fixing now. And what matters is keeping the stability and the confidence that we have at the moment intact through any process that happens. And so that's why, if I have declared today, I've just said I would be available, I would be willing, and I would expect others to join that, because it's the national interest that matters most. When we look at our hydrocarbon field off of Mackald, it's not Crogga's shareholder interest that matters, it's the national interest. When we look at our health service, it's not private partners potentially coming in, it's the national interest for healthcare. And if I step up, it'll be a lot of trauma for me. It'll be a lot of trauma for everybody around me. It's an awful job, but it's it's a privileged privilege to have. And the reason I'd be doing it, I think, is because at this moment, in the 4th year of an election, it could be that my sort of personality and character suits that role of actually honestly laying down where we are, what choices we've got, and enabling people to fix the problems that need to be fixed in 2024, and making sure we have a better election in 2026 than the ones we had in 2021 and 2016.
And there's so much we could talk about really at the moment. But, of course, one of the announcements this week, or the revelations, whatever you want to call it, was finally the energy strategy has been published, which is substantially overdue. I think it was due in the summer, wasn't it? So that's now available. You also had some questions about Crogga.
Yeah.
Were you content with the answers you received?
Well, we'll come to Crogga in a minute, but just in terms of the energy strategy, because this is mega. This is a paper that's gone up for debate in November Tynwald, and it needs to be a discussion of this, because it's got all sorts of impact for Erie Staine, for the future of the gas power station at Pulrose, for all sorts of things. So essentially what it says is that whereas it used to say in Policy Principle 1 Action that we would develop 30 megawatts of renewables on island by 2026, and it was talking about having that done by a wind farm, it now says onshore wind planning application this coming winter, solar projects in place by end 2026. There's no mention of a wind farm being in place by 2026. The solar projects were supposed to be back this year. We were supposed to be looking at roofs on the car parks by the NSC and by the hospital and down by the sea terminal with solar panels on them. That hasn't happened. Then that's now delayed to 2026. Even more fundamentally in that energy strategy, people will notice when they read it that it's talking about no costed plan as yet, and that will only be there in the next year's update of the energy strategy in 2025, which to me says, hey, the group of people I talk with in the Policy Alliance were right. We don't have costed and funded policies.
So presumably that costed strategy would be out. Is that going to be released at a similar time, or is it going to go back to the summer?
Well, it's scheduled as summer, but so was this year's, and it was in November when it was due in July.
And of course, even if it is the summer, effectively, that's the end of the 4th year of...
So to me, it would be premature to be buying wind turbines for Erie Staine. In this same report, they're talking about the fact that the power station could run until 2035 without too much investment, and it's only after 2035 that we need a substantial relook at it in terms of what the mix is in terms of the fuel and that sort of thing. So essentially,
and is that a change then?
Very much it's a change, because previously in the energy strategy they've been talking about the 2030 climate change objective requiring the power station to be history by then. So now the possibility of it being in use by 2035 is mentioned. So look, this energy strategy is a major document. We should be talking about it, and essentially what I see is it's a practical, pragmatic a realisation and expression of that realisation that we're not as far forward as dreamers wanted us were dreaming about being, and the Climate Change is looking at the Climate Change Act is looking aspirational, and people have been working really hard to enable a 2026 alternative energy deadline to be met, but this is a mission that it's not going to be met. In terms of Crogga,
so is that a failure?
Well, I do think that the Climate Change Transformation Board hasn't worked in the right way. It was about belief and aspiration and expression of faith and all of that. We needed practical response to helping people change the vehicle they drove, practical response inside people's houses. We still haven't got a home heating strategy even. We haven't got an MUA pricing strategy, all of which are overdue. It needed to be about practical things. It wasn't, and we're ending up having, in a way, wasted 4 or 5 years with stuff that's not as important as changing the way we heat our homes and changing the way we move around and changing the way we get we generate our power.
Well, these are very strong words, but from my position, obviously I have to declare that I have an direct interest in relation to the Erie Staine wind farm, so it's probably best we don't stray too much further into this. But I'm sure if Daphne Kane were here, for example, she would argue that the Climate Change Transition Board has had.
You probably heard. You might have missed it then. But in the Keys, it emerged in an oral answer to my question I asked. Actually, it was in the DEFRA departmental plan that the Climate Change Board has become a committee inside DEFRA in the same way that the Healthcare Transformation Board has become a committee inside the DHSC. So, you might argue it's not needed anymore, or you could say it wasn't working and it hasn't worked and we need to do something differently. What I would say is, if you're going to solve the vehicle problem, you talk to people who know about vehicles. If you want to solve the housing problem, you talk to people who want to know about houses. Power, you talk to the MUA and what they would want. You can't just put down arbitrary targets, as I think people got into the habit of doing in 2020, 21, 22. Moving on to Crogga, there was a big, bold announcement about NSTA accreditation, and politicians are fools if they don't seize this opportunity. But I've been following it every day, what's actually going on in NSTA. And as far as NSTA? The North Sea Transition Authority. So the North Sea Transition Authority has a set of guidelines for stewardship, operatorship, financial guidelines, what we can do in the Isle of Man, and we are doing, and we spent £150,000 since I pushed it when I was minister, setting up Manx equivalent to these guidelines, is handle the appraiser well. To get to the appraiser well, normally for the last 15, 20 years, people would have done 3D seismic survey. There is a field which the Crogga UK might or might not own, and might or might not have a licence, and might or might not be the administrator of a licence for, across, that we had an announcement about from Crogga. I've been following the NSTA website the last week or so, and the website certainly doesn't say that as yet. It might just be processing time for the information to be updated. And as far as I can see, the licence that exists on this field is in its phase A at the moment, and phase A is a phase that we never even had in our licence in the Isle of Man. Phase A was what old Crogga, as I call them, did before they made the licence application to the Department of Economic Development and got a licence for phase B, which is the one that does a 3D seismic survey. The licence in question here had a well, and the report seems to be that the well wasn't quite in the right place, and And anyhow, the field hasn't had a 3D survey on it, which is incredibly unusual in the Irish and North Sea. So that's where we are. By the end of the month, we'll know what the government has decided. And what I want to say from my position is that Mr. Robertshaw, Dr. Hubbard have made a really good case for hydrocarbons. I'm not sure they've made such a good case for doing a well without 20 years of technological advances and experience, and I'm not sure they've made the case for Crogga to have the licence to do this. So from my point of view, if if Crogga loses the ability for it to exploit the national licence in Mackord for hydrocarbons, I do hope the government's got the foresight to make an arrangement so that somebody else can do what's in the national interest with hydrocarbons.
Because there were some quite interesting answers given to some of the questions about Crogga in Tynwald last week, including, perhaps summarising the position. It appeared that Crogga was given an extended licence so that it could demonstrate that it was or had the required credentials to be a credible partner. That seems like a strange thing to extend a licence for.
Very strange. And then when it emerged that the minister confirmed that the Crogga hadn't paid licence fees for the last a couple of years, that seemed to me to knock that idea of giving an extension on the head. If you don't pay what's owed already, how can you be trusted to spend 400 million or whatever it would cost on developing a field, however much you might get in the end? I also found out in the North Sea Translation Authority, it appears that Crogga UK is fully up to date on paying its fees. So if that's an important threshold, it's met it in the UK, but doesn't seem to have met it in the Isle of Man. Look, the end of this month is another crucial hurdle in this event, and my main position is I did everything I could, to help Crogga be able to help us exploit our national hydrocarbon resource. The case is made for hydrocarbons, it seems to me, especially given that the financial angle and the public finances angle needs to be set against the climate change angle, and gas is a transition fuel. It does enable energy security, but it's a national asset. It's not the Crogga shareholders' asset, and we need to do this the right way, the proper way. If I'm completely open, I haven't made up my mind how I'm going to vote with Mr. Cannon as yet. And one of the biggest negatives for me is obviously that he tried to disregard the evidence in respect to the decision that was going to be made in July 23, and sack me on a Sunday afternoon, and that hardly inspires confidence in me. Because this hydrocarbon resource is a national resource and it's so precious and it needs to be exploited correctly.
So, because we've come to the end of the programme now, but if you were a betting man, I'm not sure whether you are or whether you aren't, are we going to see a new name at on the Chief Minister's office's door by the end of the month, by the end of the year? Well,
no, we can't afford to have it by the end of the year. Stability matters most. The national interest matters most. We've got to all come together in the House of Keys. If I was a betting man, I'd say Mr. Cannon knows that, and if it takes him to stand down to get a vote of confidence, he'll do that, because he comes from a political, from a family with a political tradition. He is an excellent guy. We are aligned in so many ways. I think he might see it's in the national interest for him, to offer his resignation and then to stand again. He's got his views that I don't agree with about hydrocarbons, public sector pensions, and him and I are not aligned. But we are aligned on the fact that the elections need to be better. We are aligned on the Legislative Council. We are aligned on the need for getting rid of silo mentality and modernising the public service.
A secret vote in Keys
out
on
to
this?
The question. I've heard that. Having given me such a rough time for even daring to suggest we caught up on questions in the House of Keys, I've heard that there's plotting to have a secret vote for the Chief Minister, going back to before 2016, when I think you and I probably spoke up for having public votes from members of Tynwald. But if that comes up, I'll be voting against that. We need to see who votes for who, even if the supporters of Dr. Allinson and other ministers who might have, or former ministers who might have ambitions in this way, want to give an opportunity to to vote one way, although we see not being sure.
I'm guessing, and this is one of the reasons we removed this. I'm guessing that people may choose to vote in all kinds of different ways if they aren't to be held accountable for what they.
Yeah.
They say.
Two stories that you'll remember, especially when I remind you. The first one is that when it was a secret vote in 2011, Peter Carron actually got 5 votes, not just the 3 Liberal Vannin Party members, but nobody ever admitted to being the other 2 who voted for Peter Carron as soon as Alan Bell beat him in the election. And then I always remember that really funny speech when Dudley Butt was leaving the Legislative Council, where he thanked the 16 people who'd voted for him and the 19 who always claimed they'd voted for him or something like that. So we don't want to go back to those days. We actually want to have an open, to put your vote where your speeches are, and to put your vote where you actually believe and you don't mind defending, rather than doing something secretly.
That was Chris Thomas. So what do you think? Do you think we need a new name on the Chief Minister's door? Or perhaps you think we need political stability and a greater focus on getting on with the job? I'm Phil Gorn. Go to Myers and Geistachrom. Thanks for listening.